My name is Saana Azzam, and I'm the founder and CEO of Mina Speakers. I'm passionate about communication and building relationships, and I'm delighted to be on Voices of the Future.
We're genuinely honored and delighted to have Saana Azzam in our little studio today, talking about Voices of the Future. Sana and I met almost 8 years ago. It was at a party, and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a speaker." And she said, "Oh, really?" And that was our first meeting almost 8 years ago. We've become friends since then, and we have developed our business in many ways. And I've admired the way she has evolved, developed, and become the leading voice, the leading speaker group, speakers bureau in the region. And I'm absolutely honored to have her here today. Sana, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Yes, you're right.
8 years ago. You remember 8 years ago?
Yes, got the flashbacks now.
Exactly.
You've been with me all the way from the beginning.
Absolutely from the very beginning. And I remember that day quite fondly. And as I came back home, I said, here's another person, another young, enterprising person going on this very awkward kind of space. And you have been so amazingly successful, and proud to be your friend, and grateful that we've been together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Honor's all mine. And it's wonderful to share the growth experience with you, and also watch you kind of grow and evolve and blossom in both directions. So it's been wonderful to share that.
Thank you. Sana, you, I'm sure, have a very colorful life, I dare say. Can we just go back to little Sana, baby Sana?
We have tissues.
And what does baby Sana remember in terms of a moment of inspiration, a moment of inflection in her life, which started shaping her to who she has become today?
That's a really big question. The first thing that springs to mind is, as you may know, Palestinian parents, Palestinian refugees that have made it to Sweden, and that's as immigrants, and that's where we're born and raised. And one of the top things that come to mind is being around 5, 6 and thinking, I need to take care of myself to the best of my capacity, because I don't want to be a burden on my parents or anybody else. And that was because we were trying to get into and integrate into the Swedish society, and we were a big family. We're 8 children plus 2 parents, so it's almost twice a basketball team, like 2 playing against each other. So there's a lot of people that need to logistically integrate into a new culture, new society, and everything else. And I think then and there, to some degree, I had to make that decision of, how can I be of service to them? How can I help them? And how can I help myself? Which has been an interesting journey to kind of unpack and unfold as I've been growing up. That's the first thing that springs to mind.
So is that what started making you resilient and dedicated and focused and disciplined in terms of your early achievements in your life?
I think that's what made me apply a lot of situational leadership. That's the word I'm going to use. How do you look around and understand the circumstances in which you're in, and make the most out of every situation you're in?
Yeah.
Now, that's something I don't wish upon my own child that would be in that age, or other children, that they have to apply that. But I think that's been instrumental in growing up quickly and kind of being of service to the people around you.
Indeed. And, immigrants, refugees, people who have made a journey away from home, they end up being more successful, actually, in many, many ways, because they have burnt the boats. There is no way back. Yeah. There is no net to fall into. There is no insurance policy. Yeah. You have to win, succeed, move forward, or just wither away.
Yeah.
In that process, you ended up getting a degree in economics, as I understand, and recently you have been recognized again. Share your story of your early graduation and being recognized later.
So that's interesting. I'll tell you, in high school, the 2 topics that I absolutely suffered with were maths and economics.
Okay.
you know. And then to fast forward that and go and get an economics degree, and then winning Female Economist of the Year, being an award-winning economist in itself, that's just, how did that happen within a couple of years? That transition from suffering with those topics to getting an award is something that I lean back on quite a lot. You don't have to love everything, but you can learn to enjoy the process along the way.
Right.
And you can be resilient enough to overcome that initial resistance that you have towards it. So that's something that I definitely picked up on. And then it's amazing to work so hard and to get a nice prize. That's like a great feeling, you know? So that's kind of rewarding. If you work hard enough, eventually it's going to pay off.
Yes, indeed. And I think it has paid off. But what I see in you is you're an amazing personality that has, over the last 8-9 years that I have known you, evolved and developed into a great entrepreneur, and you've also developed yourself as a speaker and a thought leader. Tell us about your thought process when you put together your first business plan or your first business idea. Maybe there wasn't even a plan, and said, "I'm going to create a speaker bureau." What was your thought process then?
What was my thought process? I remember thinking, so I was working at the bank, right? Prior, I was in the DIFC as a banker, and I'd worked as a gold trader. So I was very much in that suited and booted space. And then at some point, it dawned on me that I was the right person in the wrong space, which you see quite a lot. That wasn't where I wanted to be. That wasn't my calling. And I was really more interested in doing something for the community and be of service to this part of the world, to showcase Arab speakers, MENA-based speakers, I'm going to say brown speakers for lack of a better word, that are part of this region, and really showcase the Renaissance movement happening here, the fact that we have true intellectuals, thought leaders like yourself that can add value to this part of the world, but also beyond. And so that felt incredibly important. And there was no real interest or appetite for the international agencies to do that, to consolidate, have a consolidated effort to showcase the experts from this part of the world to internationally, the international stages. So it felt really important to do that. Because if you see on stages quite often, and we've seen the research, 70 to 80% of all the speakers on stage are pale male, and I'm going to add stale, you know. So we're seeing quite a lot of that, but that's just not the reality. Knowledge belongs to all of us. It's something that should be conveyed by all of us. And so it became incredibly important to say, hey, young people, women, men, old people, people from all walks of life have something to share. There's a story to tell and inspiration. So let's give them that platform and allow for others to be inspired by these role models. Yeah. So I kicked that off quite quickly and set up the agency in 2016. Yeah.
Now, I remember that distinctly because I personally, as a speaker, I used to often feel a little bit marginalized. And to the extent that I have even been given the advice that because of my background in the UK and I have a setup there, that I should literally be a UK speaker who sort of lives in Dubai. I would get a better deal and a better sort of audience because of that than if I was a Dubai-based speaker, because I'm just a local guy and it's cheap and easy to access. So I used to feel that, and so I guess you started addressing that space a little bit. Is that still prevalent right now, that you get a brief coming in saying we need somebody with this kind of background and this kind of look and feel, and has to be a doctor and has to be 1 million followers or whatever, which are very artificial and surface level things, as opposed to genuine, does this person have a story? Is the true knowledge coming through? The things that really touch people.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts in terms of the briefs that are coming in, and how should they be reformed?
This is where we come in, right? So before we even onboard any speaker, we have a vetting process, and some of them are, is there a true story here? Is there knowledge? Is there expertise? Does this person convey their thoughts concisely? And I don't mind accents, I don't mind how people sound or anything like that, but they have to be able to communicate effectively. And then I have my own X factor, which we rarely communicate, but I'll tell you here, we look at authenticity, realness. as somebody who I can truly respect when they're on stage? Is what they're saying profound and meaningful, or is it a lot of regurgitation of other thoughts? So what's happening here? That's where the filter happens before we even go and recommend them to organizers. So that's step one. And then number two is when we do get a brief, we think of diversity a lot. The number of times we've had a conversation saying, hey, this is a manel, which is a male panel.
I like that.
Are you sure you want to have a manel on, or should we, jazz it up with other females or young or different diversity? So that's a conversation we have all the time. And quite often the bias is unconscious. They're not aware. Sometimes they are. And then we have to have that difficult conversation. But diversity matters, and that's incredibly important for us. And it's important to have that type of conversation.
Diversity is important, and I think let's drill a wee bit deeper into this. One type of diversity is diversity of gender, but I think age, thought, education, background, all ethnicity, everything needs to come into the mix, because particularly the way the world is evolving and developing, we need that multiple level diversity as opposed to just gender.
Absolutely.
Or ethnicity. So in that diversity, do you feel that companies are ready to accept an anthropologist who speaks about something, or a philosopher coming in and telling a story, or are they still looking at those graduates from Harvard and Stanford coming in and talking about technology and stuff like that? Where is the bias still there in terms of the male person coming from a big university with a PhD?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is why you work with speaker agencies. We're consultants. We're here to consult you on the best strategy for your outcome. So the question becomes, what do you want to achieve?
Yeah.
What is the impact that you hope to achieve? Not just, let's just get a speaker and then we're done and they're going to talk about this topic, but where is the longevity in this story? And sometimes it's brand awareness. Sometimes it's brand ambassadorship. Sometimes it's true, profound behavioral change. But then we might need a few more hours, a few more days, a few more speakers, a few more people that are various voices that can impact your message, that challenge it. I've definitely seen an evolution. Over the course of the years, we've seen more strategy come into this. And part of it is the fact that the team is there educating our clients and strategy building around it. A great speaker can change your trajectory, your business strategy, your personal growth. And we see that in the thank you messages we receive. And that can happen over 18 minutes or several days, but impact is there.
When we talk about impact, who are amongst the most impactful speakers do you have within? Okay, maybe that's not a fair question. No favorites. Okay.
Yeah.
You use an important word for me, and it's very close to my heart, and that word is authenticity.
Yeah.
The vulnerability, authenticity, humanity, and people who are able to communicate a story. What type of speakers, what type of impact do you feel would be most relevant in the world of today? Because we're talking about the future, it's not just about our day-to-day stuff, learn how to be a good speaker or speaking lessons or whatever, but actually build a different kind of vision for doing future things. What kind of people are you intuitively looking for?
I love the question. And it's one that we've been reflecting over quite a lot. If we go through a little evolution of the space, when I set up the business, it was almost transactional. The sales trainer, the supply chain trainer, the Excel, the PowerPoint, it was very practical. And then there was a little evolution there. Okay, maybe soft skills. That's why we started phrasing it. Then came pandemic. Oh, boom. We saw a big change because all of a sudden we're not separating our two identities, in my work persona and my real persona and who I am in my personal life. They were merged. And now there was an appetite and an interest to bring your whole self everywhere. And it still is. And so for the future, and I think a core topic here is how can you continue to be your whole self in society, for the community, at work, at home, in your very personal space, all across the board, without needing to put on a mask or pretending to be something that you're not. Because I think when we are in total alignment, this is when we're truly in a good space. This is when you start eliminating depression and feeling bad and all of those elements, that burdens that we carry as humans. So for the future, it's very much about bringing the three with you.
Yeah. I'm invited to a lot of places as an advisor on boards and various other places. There are two things I'd like to share with you and get your thoughts and insights. And the first one is that I always say that in this digital world, anything that can be digitized will be. It'll be 1,000,000 times faster and 1,000,000 times cheaper. But anything and everything that cannot be digitized, love, intuition, harmony, spirit, heart, soul, creativity, imagination, judgment, ethics, values, trust, they cannot be digitized for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that's where the true value is. What are your thoughts in terms of, and people call it soft skills. I actually call them life skills. I call them hard skills. They're really not soft. They're very, very real and hard. Yeah. How do you bring that into the narrative, the conversations that you're having with large companies or with governments and so on, that these are the skills that really will take us forward?
Let's choose a really practical example. If a company is in times of crisis, the previous strategy was, bridge, ABC, acknowledge, bridge, convey, or build a story or spin it. No, none of that. Be real, be authentic. Yeah. We have a capacity to suss out who's being inauthentic, who's building a story and a narrative. And there's definitely a craving for heart-led leadership, rebel-spirited leadership that's real and authentic. And I think that is the only way to go. Because we really, I think we crave that as humans, and that is the way forward for us.
Mm-hmm. When going back to boards and C-level groups and stuff, and I encounter a lot of them, I use a phrase, and that's called the immune system response. We have an immune system, you mentioned COVID, that any virus coming from outside, our antibodies go and block it, and it's there to support us. So, and similarly, organizations and individuals have immune systems for anything coming from outside. So we as speakers or consultants or coaches or advisors go in there, and we go in and attack individual or corporations' immune system response. Can't be done here, it's too expensive, it's too difficult, it's too this, that, and the other. My biggest job at a board level, and they ask me what my job is there, and it is mindset shift, is to actually suppress the immune system response in any organization. And those immune system responses are things that affect us on a day-to-day basis in terms of business decisions and leadership and so on. What are your experiences in terms of the kind of blockages and immune systems that you encounter on a regular basis? Because I'm sure you do.
Yeah, exactly. If you ever want me to leave a room, use this expression. We've always done it that way. Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yeah, that expression makes me go, oh, but even if you did that way yesterday, but today you need to tell me why.
Yes.
We need to understand why that's happening. What is the rationale? Is this really the best idea? Yeah. And considering the growth that we're seeing on the market, that is a type of thinking you always need to apply. Take nothing for granted. Always kind of toss and turn everything that's happening. And that's really where you have true, I'm going to use the word healing and growth. Healing and growth, because repair work that happens. We've always done it that way. No, the way my grandparents used to do things is not the way I'm going to be doing things. And it's just not appropriate for this day and age.
Yeah. One of the big babas that you identified here is Professor Marshall. I use his book, like he said, his 21st book, which became successful. The first 20 were only bought by his mum and his friends. Wow. And the book was the evergreen book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Exactly.
And that, I think, to me is about that immune system response. What got me here, I became a billionaire doing the following. Yeah. Don't come and tell me what to do. Yeah. Because I know my stuff. And I think that is one of the most difficult conversations that I have, even as a speaker and as a transformation expert, is to actually have that conversation with them. And recently, actually, an engagement which was organized by your team at a university, an international business school. And when I was speaking, I said, my first slide was, I said, you think you're here today to learn something. Actually, today you're here to unlearn a lot of things. They all went back like that.
Yeah.
That unlearning process that I think we all need to go through to engage with the future.
Yeah.
Am I on a different planet when I'm thinking like that, or would you subscribe to it?
And it's almost like a spiritual experience. That's the word I'm going to use. When your ordinary life becomes your path to awakening, that's what it is. How do we learn non-attachment? Which I think these are all Buddhist concepts that I'm throwing at you, or Sufi even. But how do we not stay attached to things as they are? How do we take a step back and say, okay, this is what it is. Do I need to repeat it? Do I do it differently? And I think that's the art form. So I remember I was in Saudi Arabia with a ministerial client there, and we were helping them out for a calendar event. It was a high-pressured situation. And everywhere I was looking around, there's somebody who's potentially shouting or about to shout. And you're seeing the fuse kind of go off there. Yeah. And I'm just walking through it, and I'm thinking, how can I maneuver this whole situation with peace and flow and ease without attaching myself to anything that's happening? And I think just from a business perspective, but also spiritually, how can you move through life and not latch on to these different situations and let them define you, observe them, learn from them, but keep evolving from them as well?
Yeah. Let me go back to the immune system, because I think it's important you as a thought leader can share on that. One of the phrases that I share with the senior people is immunosuppressants. They said, which you just identified and diagnosed, I have an immunity problem. So how do you suppress that immunity system? So the example that I use is a kidney transplant. So before you do a kidney transplant, you have to give certain pills and stuff like that for immunosuppressants.
Yeah.
And then the kidney goes in, and then it has half a chance of success. So in transformation programs and any kind of change programs, we need to have that immunosuppressant. And I've introduced a few immunosuppressants in organizations, and I'll share a couple of them with you. One of them is I have a shadow youth board who sit literally beside every single board member, who are the white, the male, the over 60s. They're all sort of sitting there with a 22-year-old sitting beside them. And the reason they accept them is they don't feel threatened. If there was a 40-year-old sitting there, they say, oh, I'm going to lose my job. But the 22-year-old is not going to take that job. That was an immunosuppressant. Bringing in women and diversity within their organization was also another immunosuppressant. You don't want to really say no to that. And there are many things like that I bring in terms of culture and a soft way to enable people to reduce their immune suppressant, to bring in new ideas. Any thoughts in terms of the kind of things that you bring in to reduce the resistance that people have in terms of the new ideas you come up with? What are the sort of techniques, strategies, or tools that you use?
Amazing. I mean, we've seen different elements on the market, and kind of what you've mentioned. Another one that I think is pretty interesting is we use two strategies in-house. One is the debater. So we have one person that argues and debates every idea that comes up and finds criticisms towards what's being suggested. Now onus is on the rest of the team to find arguments why they should work. It's almost like a Steve Manning situation. And the other one is that we shift who's chairing a meeting, who's the CEO at the time.
Nice.
So it's not just me at all. It could be everybody from the intern to anybody else. We make sure that that's rotating, and that's always something that the power is dispersed equally, and that everyone feels a sense of responsibility. I often say, that we are your family, take care of us. So that concept of a sense of ownership instead of a strong hierarchy, because the strong hierarchy is going to ultimately leave the decision making to one person, and you're going to miss out on a lot of nuances. So getting a structure that's a bit more flat will help to create more consensus, more creative thinking, and empowering a lot of people as opposed to one or two or an elite.
You spoke about leadership earlier on, and What kind of a leader? You said about, what was the phrase you used in terms of leadership? Kind leadership or soft?
Heart-led leadership.
Heart-led leadership, conscious leadership.
Yeah.
When we look at the world today, the attributes of a leader, the top, say, 5 or 6 attributes of a leader, are entirely different to, say, 25, 30 years ago. We need to be a steward of the planet. We need to be very close to, much more innovation than ever before and stuff like that. In terms of future leadership, what are the top 2 or 3 things we need to have as voices of the future, coming from an expert like you, that I would look at the top 3 things in a future leader?
I have a preference towards this. And the preference is, of course, against conscious leadership. That how do people at the top not only think about themselves, but think about the collective good? It's more about caring, nurturing style of leadership. And since the world is so interconnected, how do we make sure that everybody is benefiting? There is a deep preference. And I think with the level of interconnectedness that we're seeing on social media, and the world, in a sense, has become so much smaller. Something that's happening, say, in Gaza is now going to be cascaded across the world. I think there's definitely an interest to care more for the planet, for the people, prosperity, and the words you use, which is peace.
Absolutely. On the one side, you have growth and profit in companies. And on the other side, most people talk about a triple bottom line, which is people, profit, planet. And I say prosperity and ultimately peace, because without that, nothing will succeed. Because you're living in constant fear and in constant battle mode, and we cannot survive on our sort of adrenaline all the time, because that's effectively what we've got. The other issue that I see in leadership a lot, and that is the paradoxes of modern leadership. You need to be a politician, but you also need to be humble. You need to be a global player and a local player. You need to be a technologist, but also be soft on skills and things like that. So these are all almost contradicting paradoxical skills. And suddenly we have to be way more adaptable and agile and I would say versatile as leaders than ever before. Within that, what are the things that keep you centered? What are the spiritual, philosophical, religious things that keep you heart-centered to be able to live all of these dynamics around you?
Yeah. And I think the formula to leadership is not one size fits all.
Of course.
And it's like parenting. You need to meet people with where they are at that moment in time, and that's ever-changing depending on situation and who. So, whenever I read a leadership book, I go, oh, that's great for you. Sure. And for you. So whoever's saying it within their context, that's perfectly what's needed to be done. But within mine or yours, that probably alternates. But we do have some umbrella concepts that we've been talking about that I think something we should all pursue. But leaders have a lot of pressure already to be a lot of things. So I'm definitely not going to add on more of what they should be or not be. Just follow your heart, follow your intuition, and do what feels right to the best of your capacity. Yeah. And we leave it at there. With regards to what keeps me grounded, I need to do a lot of things to remain grounded. And the reason I say that is because I take a lot of responsibility for the people that I'm working with and society as a whole, and gladly I do so. But that also means in order to remain in balance, there's a lot of journaling, meditating, retreats, spending time on my own to kind of hear where my voice is at and what I feel is right. So I spend a considerable amount of time staying grounded, so I can do what is true to my authentic self, not my ego self. That requires quite a lot of work to just stay with both feet on the ground.
Yeah, indeed. You're a young mother. You have a beautiful 4-year-old daughter. And are you hopeful about the future in which she is going to grow up? And what changes are you making to make sure that she has a wonderful environment to work with?
Yeah. Oh. My calling has definitely become more expansive through the lens of my child. And the questions that I ask myself on the daily, will probably continue asking myself for a long time, is did I offer healing and growth to the world in any shape or form, without taking the responsibility for anybody else's healing and growth, because that's onus is on us individually to do that. Did I offer that? And I think things are perfect as they are, as the way they need to unfold. And I have full faith and trust in her personal capacity to be a gift to the world. My job is to just love her as much as I can, and then she can get on with it on her own. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because when I work with people in the future of learning and education, and there are 2 or 3 great thought leaders in the book, they say that the biggest obstacle to growth of kids is actually their parents, because parents are focused to, you have to go to this particular university and you have to do that particular degree and stuff like that, which is becoming less and less important now as we go into technology executing most of the day-to-day, the routine stuff. Would you feel pressured if your daughter sort of says, I'd like to be a musician, and I'd like to be an athlete or something like that, as opposed to go to the university that you went to read economics or something like that? Is that, as a parent, do you carry that emotion inside you that I would love my daughter to be a graduate from such and such and live this kind of life?
So, Tarek, I've been in training. I've been in communications, public speaking training, leadership communication training. I've been in proper institutions that have taught me how to both communicate but also listen. And I feel like that all led up to the moment when I gave birth to my daughter. Not knowing that I've been in training for that moment. Because little did I know that this 1-day-old, 2-day-old child is communicating very loudly to me what she wants, what she needs, what she doesn't like, not verbally, all non-verbally. And the art form was to take a step back and not interfere and just listen. Because children have this amazing wisdom about themselves where they're able to communicate everything.
Sure.
Your job is just to tune into that and not have this image of what communication looks like, but being open to, okay, this is what it looks like today. I thought it was through words.
Yeah.
No, actually, it looks very different when you're dealing with a child. So my job was to back off. And to answer your question, she already knows. She's going to tell me. I think in many ways she's already communicated that, and she's just 4. So again, my job is to let her light shine on her own and not interfere with it and just be there and love her.
Let's take you to your 100th birthday. And you will be living to at least to 100, and your daughter's probably going to live to 150. The rate at which, because there are 3 or 4 people again in the book who are there talking about longevity. And our children will live to 120, and our grandchildren are likely to live to 150. Now, whether you want to live that long or whatever, that's another social question for another day. But they are going to be living that long. So on your 100th birthday, what are we celebrating? What has Saana achieved? What are her passions and things that she has created in life that we are celebrating?
I say this with full humility, and it's taken me a long time to give you this answer. I'm celebrating myself, my life, my own existence. And that's great enough. You existing as you are, that's perfect enough. We are not the sum of our achievements and awards and accolades. We as humans is perfect. So that's the celebration that's had. And I'm allowing to receive that love, to be celebrated. And I welcome to celebrate each individual and the beauty that is them.
Amazing. That's a wonderful answer. Never heard that one before, but thank you. No, I appreciate that. A lot of people talk about, when I ask this question about their family and loved ones, some people talk about achievement. And interestingly enough, very few people talk about money. They could be billionaires, but they are 100 and they don't care.
Yeah.
And we have this race over time for money and achievement and power and glory and ego and so on. And when we talk about somebody's 100th birthday, it really is humbling that people come up with human things, and you came up with one. So thank you for that. Thank you for being so open and so vulnerable in that response.
It's taken years to distill, and I keep looping back a story that's really been shaping my life for a while. I want to give it justice. So when the Buddha reached the point of enlightenment, he really did this movement, and touching the ground and touching the sky. That movement is the most beautiful thing. How do we allow for our human self to exist with full integrity of what we want, which is the money, the fame, the achievements, but at the same time, our spiritual higher self, to be celebrated. And we bring both of those into our lives. So when I'm 100, I welcome the idea to celebrate my achievements and awards and the good that we've given to this world.
Sure.
And at the same time, just celebrating existence itself. So both are welcomed.
Indeed. Thank you. As we come to the end of this beautiful interview, and thank you for being so open and so warm about all of the issues that you discussed, are there any areas of passion, any special things that you really would want to go for? And either you haven't done them yet, or would like to do, I don't know, bucket list, going off to Mars, but things that really ignite you from inside, the kinds of things you'd like to achieve.
Okay. So there is, my word in Swedish is Saana. The Saana is my name in Swedish, and it means the true. And little did I know that that's also going to be something that's truly with me. I have this beautiful gift of obviously listening to speakers all day, listening to people all day, but also training them in public speaking and working with their speech. And with that, I believe I've developed this ear of hearing when somebody's speaking their truth or not.
Right.
And so one of the things that I think are incredibly motivating is I can hear when somebody's in their essence, in their truth, and to validate them and say, yes, this is great, but also hear when they're not. So maybe you want to reconsider that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My first slide in most of my presentation, once I've done my intro, is, I said, what's going to define the future of the world, and what's going to define our future? And people say AI and technology, and there's this, no. There's one word which is more human, and the word is trust. Closely followed by truth and ethics, because you get trust by truth. So my first slide is trust, truth, and ethics. The future will be defined by these three words. I start with that, and my second slide is empathy, values, and humanity. Without that, AI is going to be nasty. Without truth and ethics, machine learning is going to be terrible. Drones were designed to help humanity, and we could have done a manifesto, and I was part of that process a few years ago with the European Union, where we said drones will not kill. So you could just program that. Any company that creates a drone that kills will be closed down. And you put the guardrails on that. Guess what? The first thing drones did, start killing.
Yeah.
So I think trust, truth, and ethics as the core of our essence, and empathy, values, and humanity is the. And I say to all my presentations, if you remember nothing from my speech from today, if you just remember these two slides or these particular attributes, I have succeeded in fulfilling that.
I love that. Goosebumps. Can I amplify that?
Please do.
Because anecdotally, I've observed the same. You know, when I set up the business, I was trying to find speakers and that we would sign on and start working with. And I would sit there and look at all these different speakers and go, oh, okay, interesting. That one's amazing. This is a professor behind the podium. That person's amazing. This is some crazy lady that's like screaming and hyper. That person's amazing, standing there rooted and speaking, not moving. Why are the three of them incredible speakers? And why is the audience receiving them so well?
Interesting.
And you have others that are kind of mimicking the style, but for some reason, we're not getting the same feedback. So I want to hire those three and work with them, but I don't want to work with those three. And it took me some time. I went, okay, the reason why these three are doing particularly well is because they're being authentic. And you as an audience member trust that, hear that, and that is them in their truth. And so their message is being conveyed 5x as a person who's speaking from here. And so I've seen that over and over again. And you see that from the stage, the goosebump moment. You know when you've made that slam dunk, my point has been made here, and I know it, and they know, and we can all feel it.
Yeah.
And it's this sensation where everyone just gets goosebumps, and you go, oh, I felt that in my heart. And that's when you're in this absolute truth mode. Yeah. And this is when you have the trust, the ethics, the truth.
Yeah.
It's a trinity.
Correct. Absolutely.
And you feel it. And that's almost like an X factor that I can't give you that this is what you need to do or where or act. Yeah. It's you and your essence, you and your truth.
Yeah.
And we feel it.
Yeah. And you do a lot of speaker training and so on. Authenticity and empathy are things that you can, and vulnerability, the things you can make people feel in their training. And is that something you look at? Or because I do when I'm coaching a CEO or something, and they say, well, what do I need to have? And I say, you need to have authenticity, you need to have vulnerability, you need to have that sense of connection and humanity. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
People just can see through BS now.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly.
It's almost, so I go through the mechanics. It's like learning a sport. So I construct it as if it's a skill, and you have to do this, and this is how you start, and this is how you finish, and this is the sentence. And I almost move it mechanically through that to put people's minds at ease. This is the option if you want to be mechanical. But by the time I'm done, I go, okay, now you can be you.
Yes.
That's the process. That's the magic in the whole process.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like you have to go through that. But that's like learning any other sport. If you're learning how to play football for the first time, you need to learn how to kick the ball before you start making it your own and zhuzhing it up like Zlatan. So it takes a few moments.
Yeah.
And there is a song and dance that needs to be had first. And we need to be mindful and respectful of that process too.
I absolutely agree. And I think to be a painter like Picasso, you need to know the basics. I totally get that. And I think, again, as a speaker, that authenticity, one of them is self-awareness. And a lot of us, when we do studies, 85% of the people say that they are self-aware, but only about 15% are.
Yeah.
85 to 90% of the people say that they are coachable, but only 15% are. And right. So I think our self-awareness isn't there. So part of that process that I go through is psychometric analysis. I go through some personal assessments and so on, even of the coaches, and so say, this is how you move, this is how you jive. Yeah. And so once you've understood, I like data, or I like this, and I like pictures, and suddenly they start getting into their comfort zones.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Any growth happens like that. That's exactly how it goes down, and it's replicable everywhere you go. Yeah. Whether it's intellectually, spiritually, technically, or just from any perspective. Yeah. That's interesting you say that, because what I do is I record people initially. Yeah. You have to look at yourself. Yes. Have you ever watched yourself speak? No. Yes. Well, how do you know if you're good or bad? Look at yourself and then make that assessment, and from there we can grow. Yeah. But that's just like life in a nutshell. Indeed.
Saana, we can continue talking about these wonderful things. It's just been an absolute privilege just chatting to you. We haven't had such a long, focused chat ever. So firstly, thank you for that. My final question is that if you were to put a little message in a bottle, that your daughter picks up in 10 years' time, or somebody else picks up in 10 years' time, knowing what you know today and your intuitive sense, what would that one sentence, one message be in that bottle that we'll find in 10 years' time, perhaps?
Oh, Tariq. This is a brilliant question. My mind wants to go in different directions. It's like, can I write several questions?
You have 2 or 3 bottles? You can have 2 or 3 bottles. You can have 3 bottles. I'll give you 3. I'll be a genie. I look like a genie. I'll give you 3 bottles. Go for 3. Go for it. Bottle 1.
Bottle 1 is, I think I want to offer her something soothing to myself, to my daughter, to whoever picks it up. And I definitely want to fall back on the quote, which is, let the wound be where the light enters you. Mm-hmm. And in any form of suffering, there lies growth. In any form of pain, after that comes ease. The only way out is through it. So, first one out. Mm-hmm. And you sit with that. That's bottle 1. Bottle 2, I will write something I said today. Let your ordinary life be your path to awakening. How do you find a lesson and learning in everything that you're doing? How do you make it sacred? How do you see something more profound in everything that we're doing? Because there are lessons everywhere, there are signs everywhere, but how do you take that and internalize that for your own growth? So that would be my number 2. Like today, I've taken so much out of this conversation, and it's one that I'm going to carry with me for a long time. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And then number 3 is a question. And the question is, did you offer hope and healing?
And that's exactly what Voices of the Future is about. That's how I ended, through hope, through healing, through being able to tell a story into the future. And my job as the conductor of the orchestra is to bring in all of these elements together, connect the dots, and look at the divergence. And all of it is coming: hope, healing, peace, harmony, synchronicity, life. All of these wonderful things come together. And that's what this thing is all about. And thank you so much for being an integral part of it and giving us your thoughts and ideas.
Thank you. I want to also acknowledge what you're doing here, Tariq, because I think what is so beautiful about this initiative is, I guess we were raised with the idea that in order for you to feel good about yourself, be in a healed space, you have to wear a maroon robe and live in a mountain and be something spiritual, fully dedicated. But actually, this is not the case. You can still be your whole beautiful self and be at peace and still achieve all the beautiful things you can do and add value to the world. And all these voices in you are doing exactly that. How can you be in a suit but still have a healing presence? And I think that's the most beautiful thing ever.
Saana, thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you. Thank you very much.